Okay, so it's a brand new day, and just looking at this blocking that I did yesterday with some fresh eyes. And I know I was confident that I was going to move on to the splining stage at the start of this video, but I'm just going to go through this animation that I've done and comment on a few more tweaks before I call this blocking final. So I'm basically pretending that I've shown it to someone and they've given me some notes, even though in today's lesson, I'm actually that same person. In the real world, it will be a different person. Anyway, let's have a look. So what my feelings are is I kind of want to move away from our video reference and I kind of want to make it more cartoony. So I'm liking all the start poses. I obviously need to stick more poses in there, like all that anticipation poses and stuff. Not all the poses are there, but basically I want to make everything more cartoony. So for example, here on the push off, I'm really going to stretch him off. I might even add a little bit of scale on the forearms here, just so I can really sell this push. At the moment, it looks a little bit weak. And then up the top here, I'm going to really cartoon up his feet. So really get him like up there, something like that maybe. There you go. I can't really draw that well. So it just shows you that you don't actually need to know how to draw to be an animator these days. And then I'm going to do a similar thing on the ground here. So I'm not liking the way that I land. I actually want it to make it a little bit more cartoony. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave 1 foot kind of up in the air like this, and then stretch this one down, kind of like that. So then on the contact frame, I'm going to land with this foot, and then 1 frame later, this one's going to slap on the ground. So that's just something that's going to make it a little bit more cartoony. And I'm really going to stretch this guy out. So here is his hips. I want to kind of get his chest up here and his arms. So really stretch him out. And that's because I'm thinking of the bouncing ball exercise. So when our bouncing ball is going to drop from up here, I'm thinking about our spacing, nice and tight, and then I'm going to make this really fast and stretch him out over these last kind of ones here. Here is the ground in this example. So hopefully that makes sense. It will when I've gone ahead and animated these things. And now on the ground here, it's a little bit hard to judge at in this blocking stage, but I really want to, I know earlier I wanted to bounce him up, so maybe even get him a little bit airborne. I'm still undecided whether I want to do that or not, but maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I'm just going to tidy up this end bit to kind of sell it. For me, it doesn't kind of, the ending's a little bit boring, so I'm going to see what I can do there to make it a little bit better. All right, so that's what I'm going to do in the next little pass. So I might spend about 30 or 40 minutes doing that, and then I'll just jump back in and I'll show you what I have done. All right, so I've made a few tweaks to my first pass of the blocking here. So I'm actually a lot happier with the changes that I've just made, but I haven't made all the changes that I want. I'm still not very happy with this ending here. But rather than me spend a lot more time fixing it now, I want to show you the process of me working through a problem area, something that I'm not kind of happy with. So let's go through this and just scrub through and see the changes that I've made. So some of it's quite subtle, but I've spent a little bit of extra time looking over the edge here, so I just added an extra keyframe there. I think I still need to push this pose. Now here, around frame 51, when I get into the splining stage, I'm going to show you a little trick where we're going to break the elbow. And so the arms are going to look backwards for a frame, but it's going to look okay in at full speed. So I'll show you that a little bit later on. That's called breaking the joint, but it's something I don't want to do in this stage because it's just going to be confusing. But you can see I've stretched this one out. That's a lot better. At the top here, I've kind of given him more of a squash to the middle. So he's kind of, I want him to spend a lot more time in the air and then make it a little bit more cartoony with the stretch down here. So you can see I've got the right foot hitting the ground first and then the left foot following behind. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is switch over everything into spline mode and add in all our missing keyframes. So make sure we've got all our breakdowns in there and basically flesh out the animation. And I'm probably going to do it in fast forward. So get your eyes ready. Here we go. Alright, so the first thing I'm doing is selecting all my curves and changing them to be Bezier. I actually did that a few times in the previous animation pass, so I switched back and forwards a few times. And now I'm just jumping to my previous and next keyframes with the up and down arrow and sculpting the keyframe that is there. I haven't added any extra keyframes yet, but I'm about to find the midpoint in between these frames here. I take what the computer is going to give me, and then I'm going to key it and adjust. So right about here, I key that frame and then adjust the timing, and then I can go ahead and just tweak it to my liking. So that's a really quick way of finding a breakdown point when you're in spline mode. Alright, so I'm doing the same thing here, finding the midpoint and then adjusting that particular breakdown key. Alright, so I'm going to jump forward a little bit in time, and still on the same pass, but just a little bit forward in time. Alright, we've finished the first kind of section now with all those breakdowns, and I just wanted to work on this settle, and I decided that my arms were distracting, so I've turned them off with the property there. That property is actually located on the root bone, and so I'm just hiding all the other properties there, selecting my keys that are past that and deleting them, and then changed it to be constant so it wouldn't slide back. So I actually do turn the arms back on later, but I just thought now they're distracting me, so I'll get them out of my way, work on each of these torso sections one by one, and then add the arms back. But like I said earlier, if you guys are struggling with the arms, just feel free to do the whole entire pass with the arms hidden, and then come back and do the arms. So what I'm focusing on now is just that spiral with the hips and the torso. I'm trying to make it feel natural. So the hips should move with the weight as it shifts over on the leg. So it's a little bit of a hassle to try and do that. I did decide I needed to get into the graph editor just to tweak it a little bit. Yeah, don't be afraid of the graph editor, but don't jump into it too early. So I'm in the splining stage, which is a great spot to actually jump in and tweak these handles. Right, I'm going to jump a little bit forward ahead now. So I'm still working on this torso, but what I decided to do is work up the chain. So I started on the torso control, then I did the spine and the chest, and I'm trying to delay each body part after the other one. So we're kind of doing a successive breaking of joints. So the hips move before the spine, and then the spine moves before the chest, and all the way up. So we get that head wobble there. It makes it nice and natural. You can probably see what I'm talking about there. Then I'm just tweaking the curves to try and refine that a little bit. And you can see sometimes I'm just moving the whole section together by selecting more than one key, and then that way it's really quick and fast to work in the graph editor. Alright, so let me just jump forward, and then I'll jump back to real time so you can see these changes that I have made. So basically I've done a little bit of adding extra keys at the start here, and then I've hidden the arms and I've worked on that torso bounce. So I'm happy where it's headed now at the end. So my next step is to, actually I just scrub through from the start and show you the changes. The next step is to move into the graph editor. I've only done a little bit of graph editor work at the end here. So you can see I've got a weird move there. So I'll fix that in the graph editor just to make sure that he gets to all his poses in a nice way. You can see I've got the breaking of the arms here. I'll need to tidy that up, but I'll do that soon. And also need to make sure that my feet, the spacing is good. You can see how they slow down on the ground here, but I want them, the feet is going to act like a bouncing ball, so I want the spacing gap to be the biggest. I don't want it to slow down before it hits the ground. So I'm liking where this ending is heading. It's kind of got the bounce that I was talking about at the start, but I think he's still taking too much time around frame 70. I think he's slow to get back up. So I'll just play it at full speed and we'll have a look. Yeah, so I think he just spends a little bit too long down low, but I'll see what I can do about that, but maybe when I add the arms back, it might smooth things out a little bit. So what I'm going to do now, work on the arms and then head into the graph editor to start splining this out fully. So I want to show you just working on the first arm here. So I've turned them back on obviously, and I'm just taking those keyframes and just sculpting the position from my eye. And then I realize I have to jump over to our root bone and make sure I delete those keyframes so that the arms stay visible now. So I'm just swinging this arm through, just keying it on those particular keyframes, not worried about adding any keyframes as yet, and just judging by my eye. I do jump into the graph editor a bit later on, but I work on the right arm first, and then I do exactly the same thing on the other side. But I'm going to jump back to real time and show you the result. Alright, so I'm more than halfway through my splining stage. I've done a little bit of work to the ending now, so you can see that the arms are animated. I've offset them as well, so when we're jumping down like this and they're swinging through, I don't want them to be swinging at the same rate because that's going to create some weird looking animation. So I've kind of offset them. You can see his left arm goes further back, and so we get a little bit of a wobble. I haven't done much animation on the hands and the fingers. That's what I'm going to do in the next pass, as well as work on the feet and the eyes and do a little bit of jaw animation. Basically add in all of our animation. And also going to fix this dodgy animation at the start here in the graph editor. Alright, let's jump forward and fix that. So I'm starting with my hands now. Basically I want to do mainly follow through and overlap on the hands mostly, and also I'm going to pose out our fingers just for a natural pose on that frame there. I'm looking at my camera view to get the best view there. So that's the way I'm working on these fingers and hands, is like jumping forward to the next keyframe and positioning it in a not so ugly pose. And you can see I'm have to add in extra keyframes on our fingers because they're not actually keyed like they were before. So I just want to be really subtle, and I don't want to be final at this stage because I'm going to fix any of the errors in the polishing stage. So drag and overlap on the wrists or the hands, and then just a nice shape on the fingers. Alright, I'll also do the same on the other side, but I'm going to jump forward and show you the feet. So the way I'm thinking about these feet is exactly like our bouncing ball. So I'm turning on our motion paths and then jumping into the graph editor, and you'll see that I've actually grabbed the wrong curve there. Sometimes that happens, but I want to grab the Z location and grab that handle and make it look like the bouncing ball handle, so it's going to be sharp. And then I'm just sculpting all the other poses on the actual keyframe, so I don't need to tweak the curves on those frames. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'm just basically looking in that arc in the 3D viewport. I also don't want it to be too close to the body up the top. Like I want the spacing to be different to the torso. So I don't want it to be stretched out too soon, and I don't want it to be too slow where he's kind of his knees are hitting him in the head, if that makes sense. So once I've worked on that foot, I jump over to the other side and I do a similar thing. I'm trying to keep that arc nice on that foot and sculpt the frame, sculpt the pose so it kind of looks good as it comes off the ground. Also, I don't want the spacing to be the same as the other foot. So I'm bringing his left foot slightly higher and dragging it behind the other one. But let me just jump forward now and I'll work on the next section, which is the eyes. So I'm just grabbing all those appropriate bones there, keying the first frame, and then also keying a closed frame. And then I can just copy and paste those keys where I want him to blink. So I think I did 2 frames closing, and then hold the close for 2 frames and then open on about 4 frames. And then I'm doing a little bit of positioning the eyes, but I just want to get the rough blinks in there and rough directions, but I will later on go back and polish it to make it a lot nicer. But the main thing I'm doing is I'm just borrowing the keyframes that I've already set and then pasting them where I want them to be. Okay, so I finally made it to the end of this splining stage, or I'm going to call it the end. I'd like to do more work on it, but I'm running out of time. So I just want to show you that still at this stage, everything is keyed on the same frame. So look at that action editor. It's all nice and neat. And I haven't actually done a lot of work in the graph editor so far. I have done a little bit just on those tricky spots that I just need the graph editor to do the job for me. The only thing that I haven't keyed on the same frames as everything else is the jaw and the eyes, and that's just because they don't need so many keyframes. And now I just want to show you a few things inside the 3D view. Let's have a look at this animation. I want to show you the arms actually. So when we're going here, you don't need to worry about weird penetrations or weird poses in the 3D. We're only concerned with how it looks inside the camera view. So here I've kind of got his arm bent back in a really unnatural way, and that's just because I wanted to show the fist on the other side of the body. Even though this is not the greatest pose, sometimes you have to fight with the character to get it to do what you want. And so here, having that hand showing behind his head is a better pose than it's just hidden. Hopefully that makes sense. That will give me a better anticipation as it swings through. Now let's have a look at this breaking of the joints that I was talking about. His arms are backwards and we've got some penetrations, but it doesn't matter because you're not going to be able to see it. And this crazy frame is only going to happen over one frame. So then we're back to normal on the next one. So you don't need to worry about weird stuff. It's going to look okay. All right, and this is where I'm breaking the joint. This is the frame where I'm actually animating on 3 axes. So we're going from here, which is just on the Z, and then we're going into this pose here. It has all 3 axes, and then we're back to normal here. But you might also know that I'm doing a little bit of stretch and squash on the limbs just to accentuate. So let's have a look at this in the video clip editor, just to make some notes for myself before I show it to an animator friend of mine and get some final polishing notes so I can make this look as good as possible. All right, so let's go back to frame number 1, and I'll just play this a few times so you can see it in all its glory. First thing I notice is I'm going to have to move the camera up because over here he's jumping out of the frame, and I've got more room at the bottom here. So I'm just going to grab my camera and just shift the camera up a little bit, just so it's maybe about there, and then he's got more headroom at the top there. So that's something that I was fighting with. All right, let's have a look at this start bit. So this pose here, this animation into this bit, you can see it's a little bit weird still. So I fixed a lot of the problems, but he kind of feels like he hits a wall, like he moves forward, and then he just clunks with his chest. So I'm going to tidy that up a little bit, so somewhere around there. And then also there's something weird happening with his hands. So he gets here, and then his hands is kind of flap out. So that's just some edited animation that I should have paid more attention to. So I'm going to try and fix those poses. All right, I'm liking how I'm just having a look at his hips now. I'm looking at how they're bouncing around like in an arc. So then that's doing a nice little jump off here. Just having a look at the jump frame now. So I like how he's stretching off, but I still need to do a bit of polish work to make sure that every single pose is looking good. So this one's a little bit weird. If I'm looking at the feet, I need to, I'm just going to do a little bit of polish work, but it's looking great for the end of the splining stage. Now you might be able to notice this arc at the top kind of goes a little bit flat. Now I haven't drawn it on the right thing, but I'm just showing you. This is intentional because what I want to do is I want him to jump up there, and I want him to spend quite a few frames as hang time because I want to accentuate the change in direction. So he's jumping up, I want him to hang there, and then I want him to shoot down really, really fast. But if I'm looking at the spacing here, so here's the top of my arc where he starts to come down, I think I just need 1 extra frame, so between frames 62 and 63, just so he, just looking at the spacing now, just so that he doesn't change directions quite so fast. So he just needs 1 more frame somewhere around here just to give him a better ease into the change of direction. And I'm also looking at the spacing of these hips, and I'm noticing that the second last frame this spacing between 65, 66. Yeah, so if I look at this frame here, so this one here it's moving this distance, which is actually shorter. So he's actually slowing down before he gets to the ground. So when I'm doing the polishing, I'm also going to make sure that he doesn't slow down. But I'm also going to be fighting with the feet, because the feet are going to be doing a similar thing. But I'm going to have to strike a balance between not creating a really bad pose with this leg, with these legs, and speeding him up on the ground. You can also see I've stretched out his hands here to give a nice stretch frame. Alright, so the landing's working a lot better. I'm not liking how these feet are kind of coming down. I do like how it's offset, but it kind of, I think this foot needs to be a little bit out more. So I'm going to move it to the screen right and see how it looks. And I'm also going to show this to an animator friend of mine and see what notes he can give me, as well as doing my own notes that I've already taken. Alright, so I'm going to jump forward into me doing that. So the feedback I got was exactly the same as the notes that I made for myself. There's a few minor little ones, but I'm just going to focus on the big issues and then just let some of the smaller ones pass. So I'm working on the start bit here to try and get rid of that part where he hits the wall. So this is the section where, this is the stage where I'm actually going to do a lot of work inside the graph editor, just to make sure that nothing sticks in space. So it's really difficult to add the drag and overlap just to get this little piece here working nice and natural. But you can see I'm working in the graph editor now to try and rectify all those issues. I will come back and fix the wrists, but I'm focusing on the most important parts first, which is the torso section. Alright, so I'm just going to jump a little bit forward now and show you how I added the extra frame or the change of direction in the drop. So this is in real-time speed now, so I'm just finding that between frame 62 and 63 where I want to add the extra frame. I've decided it's going to be here, so I'm going to key everything on this particular frame, then select all my curves and shift them one frame over. So now I've basically added one extra keyframe there, but I'm not done. I will have to go into the graph editor and make sure each one of those curves is still behaving itself. But before I do that, I'm going to check in my my motion paths just to see if I've broken anything, and it looks kind of terrible. So yeah, for the rest of this polishing pass, I'm just going to jump ahead and show you the finished result. So now it's just a lot of work inside the graph editor, I'm afraid. Just making sure all my handles are behaving themselves. Things that are smooth, things that are sharp are meant to be sharp, and you can see I'm adjusting the spacing there. Alright, so let's look at this final result. Whew. That was a lot of hard work, folks. Now, it's not perfect, as you can probably see, but this is as good as it's going to get for the moment. I've basically just had to pick and choose the battles that I was going to fight. So I can't sit there and spend as much time making every frame as perfect as I want it to be. I've just picked the biggest problems and I've tried to tackle them. So sometimes you have to just pick the battles that you're going to fight. But this is the animation, the final animation. Let's have a little bit of a scrub through, have a look at it, and I'll show you a few of the changes that I made. So I've done a little bit of work here to try and stop him from hitting that invisible wall. So I can do a little bit more to loosen it up and make it feel a little bit better, but that was good enough for the moment. In this little anticipation here, you can probably see I've done a little bit of footwork there. I left it for the polishing stage because it's not keyed on the same frames as the other ones. Plus, it's a little detail that really didn't affect any of the previous animations. So I left it for the polishing, and it's just that little subtle touch that's going to add a little bit of extra believability to it, even though it took, like, I don't know, about a minute to animate that. So that wasn't much work at all. I've done a little bit of work to this jump off. Obviously, I've shifted the camera up a little bit so he doesn't hit the top of the screen. I added an extra frame of slow out of this hang time, because what I wanted him to do was kind of stick there, slow out, and then shoot down to the ground. So I'm pushing the spacing of my stretching, bouncing ball, basically. That's what I was thinking about when I was animating this fall here. And then with the settle, but I previously mentioned that I was a little bit unhappy about how the weight should go more towards the screen right. Is that way? Oh, my camera's backwards, so that way. But all I did was shift his foot over, and that kind of made it feel a little bit better, and it wasn't much work at all, so I just left it like that. Yeah, so they're the main changes. I've obviously done a little bit more work to his eyes as well. So previously in the last blinding stage, I animated the eyes, but they weren't final. So if you watch his eyes, they're all animated now, and yeah, I'm pretty happy to put my name to this. Even though, as I said, I can do a lot more work to it, I'm going to call this one finished. So I look forward to seeing what you guys can create. Now, I'd like to remind you, this is probably the hardest exercise that you guys are going to do in this body mechanics course. So don't worry if you have to do it multiple times. Each time you're going to get better. But anyway, I look forward to seeing what you guys produce, and I'll see you in the next video.